Hello, my name is Haley Steinman and I'm here with Mariana Kuhl and Laura Perez from Group 7. Today we are going to discuss how our student lesson over copyright fits the Assure lesson model from the book Instructional Media and Technology. The A in the Assure lesson model stands for Analyzing Learners. When analyzing learners, three specific components must be addressed. When looking at the general characteristics of our learners for our copyright lesson, we knew that they were 5th grade students in a general education classroom. We knew that students would have varying ability levels from GT students to students with learning disabilities, and we knew that we could possibly have some English language learners as well. To address these general characteristics, we made our copyright presentation grade level appropriate, relatable, and engaging for students. In addressing students' learning styles, we identified 5 possible types of learners and included activities in our lesson that would benefit all learners. For our visual learners, we have the presentation in general, which is projected onto a screen for all students to see. The Powtoons video, as well as the student handout, are also beneficial for visual learners. For our social learners, opportunities to turn and discuss learning with a peer is given, as well as small group participation for completion of a final product. For the auditory learners, the teacher is presenting the information out loud to coincide with the projected presentation. For our more linguistic learners, the creation of a final product will aid in and display understanding. And to address our kinesthetic learners, we included an opportunity for movement while doing a quick post-assessment practice. All of these learning and participation activities will be discussed in detail further on in our presentation. Lastly, to analyze our learners, we had to know their specific entry competencies. We used a Kahoot pre-assessment to gain a clear understanding of students' current knowledge of copyright while keeping in mind that the classroom teacher, Ms. Stewart, had informed us that students had prior knowledge of the research process and were also comfortable using the internet and computer peripherals such as the keyboard and mouse. The first S in the Assure lesson model represents state standards and objectives. Some of the state standards that are met in our student presentation are grades 3 to 5 Technology TEKS 5B and 5C, which state that the student is expected to model respective intellectual property by not illegally copying software or another individual's electronic work. Many 5th grade English language arts and reading TEKS are also met, including 20A, 20B, and 20C, which state that the student is expected to use conventions while speaking and writing, including subjects and predicates and specific parts of speech, and ELAR TEK 29 that states students will work productively in teams and participate in student-led discussions. According to the Assure model, when stating an objective, the ABCD format is used. Our objective for students is, when given 5 beginnings of copyright scenarios, the 5th grade learner will be able to produce at least 3 correct endings and correctly identify at least 3 of the scenarios as upholding or infringing upon copyright laws. A. The audience is clearly identified as 5th grade learners. B. Behaviors are made clear by stating that students will produce and identify copyright scenarios under the C condition of being presented with 5 scenario beginnings. The D degree to which learning is expected is evident in the statement of at least 3 times.
Now we will focus on the second S in the Assure model, which stands for Select Strategies and Resources. When selecting the strategies and resources, we need to keep a few things in mind. What knowledge, skills, and attitudes do the students possess? Which strategies and resources are we incorporating? Will the students be able to meet the objectives through these strategies and resources? The students from Mrs. Stewart's class present a multitude of experience with the use of technology. The students have varying attitudes towards copyright. Some students are excited to learn about copyright and know its importance. Some students have never been exposed to this topic. The students' knowledge will be assessed through the use of a program called Kahoot. I will begin by discussing teacher-centered strategies along with media incorporated through that strategy. The first teacher-centered strategy is tutorial. In the beginning of our lesson, we decided upon a pre-assessment which was made from Kahoot. We incorporated this questionnaire to inform us how familiar the 5th grade students are with copyright. The second teacher-centered strategy is presentation. The entire lesson for the students is made on PowerPoint. PowerPoint will captivate the audience's attention while the teacher explains copyright. It's a different way of delivering a lesson. The PowerPoint incorporates links to a few other web-based teaching tools that will enhance the learning of copyright. Teachers will be directly instructing throughout the entire presentation. We also use a teacher-centered strategy of demonstration by incorporating the Powtoon video. Powtoon creates a realistic scenario that engages all students. This expands an understanding of copyright laws. The last teacher-centered strategy is drill and practice. Through the use of a kinesthetic activity, the students will be given scenarios and will need to decide whether it upholds copyright law or creates a copyright infringement. A scenario will be called out, and students will participate by moving from one side of the room to one side of the room, depending on their answer. Students will be randomly called upon to explain their answer. Scenarios will be discussed and clarified for further understanding. Next, we are going to move to the student-centered strategies. The first student-centered strategy is discussion. There will be discussions throughout the presentation. These discussions will be teacher and student-led, deepening the understanding of copyright laws for students. Students will have an opportunity to explain their thinking and find an answer to questions they may have. There will also be a time when the students think, pair, and share to communicate what they've learned. The second student-centered strategy is cooperative learning. Cooperative group work is a strategy that requires each student to contribute to the creation of a product with a copyright scenario. This will be completed as their final assignment. The third student-centered strategy is discovery. Students are in charge of their own learning through the creation of their group product. As students leave the classroom, they will need to turn in an exit ticket in which they will rate their confidence level concerning the copyright lesson. The students will have been exposed to an entire learning process and enhance their learning experience. Through the use of teacher and student-centered strategies, the learners gain knowledge with copyright laws and will be able to meet the objectives as stated previously. The U in Assure stands for utilizing resources. When examining the resources that will be used, the librarian will need to follow the 5P model. Prepare the environment, prepare the resources, preview the technology, prepare the learners, and provide a learning experience. The first P, prepare the environment. Mrs. Stewart and the teacher librarian asked the technology specialist for help preparing the environment. They test the internet connection in the library and ensure that Kahoot and Powtoons are properly installed on each computer. They will also test the projector and the laptop to ensure that PowerPoint lesson will be adequately displayed. Considerations are also made with possible seating charts to keep students from distractions. Second one, prepare technology, media, and materials. Mrs. Stewart and the teacher librarian prepare a handout with basic vocabulary words. They will also make a rubric so that the students are aware of the grading criteria and of their ultimate goal. Mrs. Stewart and the librarian will make the Kahoot pre-assessment and the Powtoon video. They will ensure that all student computers are working so that the pre-assessment runs smoothly. The teachers will also need to make sure they have materials available for the group project. The materials need to be copied, and they will also have an exit ticket ready to implement. Number 3, preview the technology, media, and materials. Mrs. Stewart and the teacher librarian preview Kahoot and Powtoons to ensure that they are working properly and to guarantee that they are academically appropriate. Number 4, prepare the learners. Students in Mrs. Stewart's class have used Kahoot in the past. The Kahoot assessment will give the students and the teacher an idea of their copyright knowledge. The students will also be presented with a rubric to make them aware of their final grading requirements. And last but not least, number 5, provide the learning experience. Mrs. Stewart and the librarian expect students to have a firm understanding and to be able to determine whether the scenario is upholding or infringing copyright laws. All students will participate in the discussion. The instructional leaders will actively interact with groups, reassuring their knowledge and deepening their level of understanding. The students will apply their copyright knowledge through a cooperative group setting with end results of generating a project of choice based on creative levels. Completion of the kinesthetic activity along with the cooperative group project will further demonstrate an understanding of the content and the ability to apply their knowledge into use. Lastly, the exit ticket will allow Mrs. Stewart and the librarian to know the student's confidence level involving copyright infringement.
The R&D Assured model represents required learner participation.
The students' participation is integrated through our lesson through discussion, both teacher-led and student-led while in small groups. The method of think, pair, share will be used to initiate the thought process. The student will take part in an interactive Kahoot pre-assessment. Students will be exposed to new vocabulary and require application of new vocabulary using the teacher-made handout. Students will respond to scenarios by moving throughout the room in order to demonstrate the understanding of upholding or infringing copyright laws. Students are given the option to further their knowledge by visiting some copyright websites found on our handout. Lastly, their understanding is made apparent through their creation of a final product. The students will have the option of exhibiting their creativity by using mediums such as PowerPoints, Google Docs, or just as simple as making a poster. The students are required to complete 5 scenarios and identify a probable copyright situation. The last letter in the Assure model is the E, which stands for Evaluate and Revise. The students will be evaluated through the use of Kahoot pre-assessment. Also, the teacher-created rubric will serve as a way to evaluate the student's ability to meet the objective. We have posted the visual of the rubric used. It is a simple evaluation method that will guide the students in creating a final product. The students are expected to complete 5 scenarios with an appropriate real-world copyright situation. 1 point can be earned per scenario completed. Students will then identify the created scenario as upholding or infringing copyright laws. 1 point will be awarded per correct identification. If a student earns between 0 to 5 points, they will be considered a copyright beginner. In order to be considered proficient in copyright, which is the goal, students must score from 6 to 7 points. To be considered a copyright expert, the expectation is to score between 8 and 10 points. Another way to evaluate the student's confidence level on this topic is by presenting the students with an exit ticket in which they will judge their level of understanding towards the lesson. The librarian and teacher team will revise their instruction through the use of active monitoring of the students' think-pair discussions. The Kahoot pre-assessment results, as well as the observations made on cooperative group work. The noticing of students using new copyright vocabulary can serve as an additional way to know how successful teaching was and what revisions are needed for future lessons. The teacher-created rubric is a concrete model of students' learning and can guide for future instructions on area needed. Throughout our presentations, we have referred to our students' lessons as well as state standard and the Assure model. The citation for those references are listed here. We appreciate your time and have greatly benefited by taking a closer look at a copyright lesson under the Assure lesson plan structure.